Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a journey into a topic that has, well, captivated humanity for centuries. Neanderthals. For so long, the prevailing image has been of the archetypal caveman. Primitive, intellectually inferior, perhaps even brutish. But what if that widely held stereotype is fundamentally, profoundly wrong?
Indeed. For over a century, our understanding of Homo neanderthalensis was shaped by what we now recognize as a heavily Homo sapien-centric view. This led to a systemic bias that colored almost every interpretation. But the scientific landscape has dramatically shifted. I mean, really shifted. A wealth of new archaeological and genetic evidence is fundamentally reshaping this perception, demanding a complete reevaluation of who these ancient people really were. We're talking about a species that thrived across Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, from approximately 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. And for too long, we've gotten them so spectacularly wrong.
So what does this all mean for you, the history enthusiast, eager to cut through the noise and truly grasp the nuances of human prehistory? Our mission today is to unpack this incredible, almost revolutionary shift in understanding. We'll be diving deep into a stack of fascinating sources that will reveal a more complex, intelligent, and culturally sophisticated picture of Neanderthal life than you might ever have imagined. Get ready to challenge assumptions and discover surprising facts that will truly redefine what it means to be well-informed about our closest extinct relatives.
Exactly. We will move beyond that ingrained dumb brute caricature and delve into tangible, irrefutable data. From their sophisticated industrial processes to their intricate social structures and even their profound symbolic behaviors. This deep dive will uncover what was once unknown and perhaps make you desire a solution to that persistent, intriguing question. Who were the Neanderthals, really?
Redefining Neanderthal capabilities.
Okay, let's unpack this traditional view then. This idea that Neanderthals were primitive, intellectually inferior, maybe just opportunistic foragers. Where did this deeply ingrained perception even come from in the first place?
Well, it started very early, really, right with the initial scientific discovery of Neanderthal 1 back in 1856. Now, this was a pivotal moment, of course. But the interpretation of these fossil remains was heavily influenced by the prevailing scientific and societal views of the time, particularly that linear hierarchical view of human evolution that was so dominant in the mid-19th century. Early reconstructions, like Thomas Huxley's Homo hercules culmarum from the Gibraltar skull in 1864, vividly envisioned these, well, ape-like characteristics. Imagine a depiction with hairy skin, long feet, opposable toes, a stooped posture, and even, quite remarkably, a short tail. I mean, a tail.
Absolutely, a tail.
Yes, it sounds bizarre now, but that was part of the initial conception. And this image was further cemented by Marcel and Boule's very influential 1909 reconstruction, famously titled An Ancestor, the Man of 20,000 Yen. Boule's work portrayed them as brutish, unintelligent, and decidedly ape-like in their gait. And this conception, unfortunately, persisted in popular culture and even in academic circles for nearly a century. It really shaped public perception profoundly.
Right. And here's the truly fascinating part about that early perception. This stereotypical image wasn't just confined to, academic papers or scientific illustrations. It was deeply ingrained in both academic and public perception, often presented in museums through displays that emphasize their physical differences and reinforce that hierarchical view of human evolution you mentioned. We saw them placed next to dinosaurs, perpetuating the completely false fallacy of cavemen and dinosaurs living together, which of course is chronologically inaccurate by tens of millions of years. And this effectively restricted their lives to mere survival, basic functionality. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens, us, we were almost exclusively endowed with symbolic behaviors, higher cognitive abilities, complex social lives. It was as if only we had the capacity for abstract thought, culture, art, emotional depth. It created this stark, almost unbridgeable divide, this idea of them being almost human but fundamentally other. It almost taps into what some psychologists call the uncanny valley effect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That primal discomfort we feel when something looks human but isn't quite right. Could that have been part of what skewed our early perceptions?
That's a really perceptive point. And yes, the separating them and us narrative has a long and, frankly, deeply problematic history within paleoanthropology and museum exhibition. It definitely fed into a desire to find what made us unique and, by extension, superior. But modern archaeology and paleoanthropology are increasingly emphasizing the sociality and, crucially, the comparable cognitive capabilities of Neanderthals. They're actively dismantling that old narrative. And this profound shift is really evident in how they're now represented in public spaces. New hyper-realistic models in museums like Mr. N at the Neanderthal Museum in Germany, or those featured in the Human Family exhibition. They're designed to depict them with individual expressions and identities.
So not just generic cavemen anymore.
Exactly. If you were to see these models today, you wouldn't just see generic cavemen. You'd see nuanced facial features, perhaps a thoughtful gaze, a worried brow, maybe even a hint of a smile. It challenges the old, dim-witted, ape-like creatures stereotype directly. These contemporary displays aim to foster a sense of, well, familiarity and similarity. They do this by placing Neanderthals squarely within the broader context of human history and culture, rather than solely within natural history exhibits, which often isolated them next to extinct megafauna like dinosaurs.
Moving them away from the dinosaurs.
Right. This reflects, I think, a growing collective guilt over our past underestimation. It's leading to a new, much more enlightened understanding of Neanderthals as bright and intelligent, worthy frontrunners to our own species. It's a profound recalibration of our own perception of humanity's past and our place within it. 2. The new Mark Nord Fat Factory.
Now, let's dive into some truly groundbreaking archaeological evidence that drastically reshapes our understanding of Neanderthal ingenuity. Specifically from a site called Neumark Nord 2 in Germany. A fat factory, you called it, which sounds incredibly modern. What exactly was happening there that so drastically redefines them?
Yeah, Fat Factory captures it well. This site, dating back approximately 125,000 years ago during the warm-tempered Eemian interglacial period, presents truly compelling evidence of large-scale industrial activity. At a specific locale within Neumark Nord, designated NN22B, archaeologists have found abundant evidence of intensive anthropogenic fragmentation. Now, that simply means human-caused bone breakage, and it's a key indicator here. The dominant signal from this precise spot is the massive extraction of bone fat. This is a highly labor-intensive process known as bone grease rendering.
Bone grease rendering.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated technique involving systematically fracturing the bones, particularly the cancellous or spongy tissue, and then boiling these fragments to extract crucial lipid resources, fats. To give you a sense of the sheer scale, we're talking about the processing of remains from at least 172 large mammals.
Wow, 172.
At least, yes, within a relatively short period at this particular spot. And if we consider the broader NN1 lake area, this could potentially represent hundreds more animals. This wasn't just a casual activity, it was a focused, high-yield operation.
That sounds almost revolutionary. But, for someone used to the simple caveman idea, how do we know this wasn't just highly efficient scavenging? What's the strongest piece of evidence that tells us this was a truly deliberate industrial-scale operation, not just opportunistic finding?
That's an excellent question, and it gets right to the heart of archaeological interpretation. It's not just one thing. The evidence is multifaceted. It forms a robust picture that points unequivocally to deliberate activity. Firstly, the excellent state of preservation of the bone assemblage. It's remarkable. This is coupled with the virtual absence of non-anthropogenic modifications, meaning very little evidence of carnivore gnawing or natural weathering. That points directly to human activity being the primary agent of modification.
Okay, so less animal interference.
Right. Secondly, the limited spatial distribution of the bone fragments and the rapid sedimentation of the encasing matrix strongly indicate a relatively short, intense use of the locality. It wasn't scattered, sporadic activities over a long period. It was focused. We see abundant signs of human-induced bone fractures, specifically green bone fracturing.
Green bone fracture.
Yes, these are fractures that occur when bones are fresh, before they dry out and become brittle, or, during natural deposition. If you were to visualize this, imagine heavily fragmented bones with smooth, acute to obtuse fracture angles. Very specific types of breaks. These fragments are often broken into very small pieces, consistent with ethnographic accounts of bone grease production from much later periods, but the technique is similar.
Ah, so we see similar patterns elsewhere.
It's exactly. Some experimental work shows that bone fragments less than 5 centimeters in maximum dimension are ideal for efficient grease extraction. And that's what we see. The consistency in these fracture patterns across numerous bones is a strong indicator of deliberate, repeated processing. Furthermore, when analyzing skeletal element representation, basically, which bones are present and how broken they are, archaeologists use methods that analyze patterns of bone density and destruction. The results consistently support the interpretation of bone grease rendering. And the sheer quantity of herbivores processed also supports this. It implies a routine, almost industrial harvesting of animals for their fat content. It wasn't just luck.
And where do fire and those large animals fit into this picture? You mentioned boiling the bone fragments. How integral was fire to this whole process?
Oh, fire played a crucial, absolutely central role, and in multiple ways. Abundant signs of fire use, specifically rubefacted, which just means reddened by heat dolomite clasts, rocks, and charcoal, are directly associated with these bone processing activities. They clearly used heated stones to boil the bone fragments. This indicates a sophisticated pyrotechnological expertise.
Pyrotechnology.
Essentially, a mastery of fire for specific industrial processes, not just warmth. This was critical to this industry. If you look at the cross-sectional profile from the site, like the one from H40, L40 in the research papers, you can see distinct concentrations of these thermal-altered elements. You'd see orange squares for burnt faunal remains, red dots for the reddened dolomite clasts, gray dots for charcoal, all distributed at different depths within level 3, directly correlating with the recovered crania and bone fragments.
So the evidence is layered right there.
Precisely. This visual representation clearly demonstrates the intensive and repeated use of fire. Regarding the animals, the spatial distribution of selected body parts further supports a focus on bone processing for fat. Marrow and grease-rich long bones, like femurs and humeri, are clearly clustered in specific areas of the site. This indicates they were deliberately brought there for processing. In contrast, lower nutrient yield bones, such as foot bones, are more dispersed across the excavation area. They were probably discarded or just not specifically targeted for fat extraction. This clustering of high-yield bones indicates selective carcass transport to this fat factory.
That suggests incredibly sophisticated planning, a deep understanding of animal anatomy and resource potential. What kind of animals were they processing, and did they hunt them year-round?
The animals included a variety of large species, things like Equispeo horses, Bias primigenius, aurochs, which were massive extinct cattle, and various cervids, deer. Their age structures and seasonality assessments, based on detailed analysis of tooth crown height, wear, development, replacement, and even bone growth, all indicate that animals were killed in all seasons.
All seasons, so they were there year-round.
It certainly suggests that. It means Neanderthals were active in the vicinity of Neumark Nord throughout the entire year, implying a settled or at least a regularly returning presence. Now, hunting strategies in this warm interglacial habitat might have differed from colder settings, that's true, but other Neanderthal sites do show selective targeting of adult, energy-rich individuals. This wasn't merely scavenging. It involved deliberate action, often coordinated and planned. For example, the Moran and Laborde sites in France show compelling evidence of coordinated group ambushes. Neanderthals there utilized natural landscape features, like gullies or ravines, to trap prey animals. Very clever.
Using the landscape itself.
Exactly. They also demonstrated selectivity in processing carcasses, choosing the most valuable parts. This indicates highly efficient planning, and it often relied on their deep knowledge of prey animals' social behavior to move them into prepared killing zones, sometimes without driving them to flight until the very last minute. It demonstrates truly sophisticated tactical thinking.
So their diet wasn't just this hyper-carnivore image we often had. Did it consist solely of meat and fat from these large animals?
Not at all. Not even close, really. Alongside the massive bone fat extraction, there's compelling evidence that carbohydrate sources were a significant part of their diet. It shows a much broader subsistence strategy than we used to think. Charred remains of hazelnut, Corylus spinellana, acorn, Quercus sbr, and blackthorn, that's slow plum, Prunus spinosa, were retrieved directly from the NN22B excavations.
Nuts and fruits.
Yes. And furthermore, macrobotanical analyses from the site have identified over 190 plant species. These include other carbohydrate sources like cattail, Typho spo, and reed, Phragmites australis, various berries and fruits such as dewberry, Rubus, elderberry, Sambucus nigra, and fat hen, Chenopodium album. Also potential green vegetables like Rumex crispus and Urtica dioica, or plants usable for both greens and seeds. The notably open areas around the basins, characterized by upland herbs and grasses, including wild relatives of wheat and barley. These would have afforded abundant access to grass seeds. And grass seeds are well documented as a regular component of the Neanderthal diet at other sites too.
Wow, okay, so a really diverse menu.
Absolutely. This clearly shows they were adept at exploiting a wide range of available food resources, indicating a diverse and highly adaptable subsistence strategy, not just animal products. They were truly omnivores, much like us.
This whole picture sounds like they were actively shaping their environment, not just living within it. Are you suggesting they were like prehistoric landscape architects?
Well, maybe not architects in our sense, but what's truly fascinating here is that Neanderthal presence in this area for at least 2,000 years correlated directly with a period of striking vegetation openness. This isn't likely a mere coincidence. This implies they had a distinct ecological footprint, likely co-created by their own activities.
What kind of activities?
Things like intensive fuel collection for their fires. They needed a lot of wood. Trampling the vegetation through their movements around the site, stone procurement for tools, and crucially, deliberate burning of the landscape.
Deliberate burning.
The evidence points that way. This directly challenges the long-held view of prehistoric hunter-gatherers as having only a limited or negligible passive impact on their ecosystems. Instead, it suggests a more active and sophisticated role in shaping their environment. Possibly to improve the predictability and yield of prey animals, controlled burns can promote new growth that attracts herbivores, or maybe to clear areas for better access to specific plant foods. This level of environmental manipulation points to a far more sophisticated understanding of their ecosystem than previously attributed. It pushes back the timeline for such complex landscape management significantly.
Okay, let's do a quick micro recap here. So looking back at Newmark Nord, what stands out most is that Neanderthals 125,000 years ago weren't just hunters. They were running what amounts to an industrial-scale fat processing plant.
That's the core of it, yeah.
This wasn't about mere survival. It was about advanced planning, resource optimization, understanding chemistry and fire, and even actively shaping their environment. It really shatters the simple forager myth entirely.
Completely. We saw the evidence from the sheer number of fragmented bones, those specific green bone fracture patterns, the direct association with sophisticated fire use, and selective carcass transport. It all paints a picture of sophisticated, active resource managers. 3. Beyond fat. Other demonstrations of Neanderthal industrial complexity.
That's a lot to absorb from just one site, but it seems the fat factory is just one piece of a much larger puzzle, pointing to widespread ingenuity. Let's unpack their other technological advancements. What else were they capable of?
That's the core of it. The evidence for Neanderthal ingenuity extends far beyond bone grease rendering. It wasn't an isolated flash of brilliance. Their tool-making was remarkably sophisticated. Their hide processing was absolutely essential for survival in glacial climates, and their understanding of fire went far beyond simple warmth or cooking. These were not isolated skills, but part of an interconnected technological and cultural system that allowed them to thrive for hundreds of thousands of years.
Okay, let's start with their stone tools. For so long, we imagined them just, crudely chipping away at rocks. How advanced were they, really?
Well, they mastered what's called the Liverlore reduction strategy. This wasn't just about striking a rock haphazardly to get a usable flake. Not at all. It involved a precise, multi-stage process of preparing a stone core, the source rock, in a very specific way. The goal was to produce flakes of a predetermined size and shape.
Predetermined, so they knew what they wanted before they struck the rock.
Exactly. To visualize this, imagine a flint knapper carefully shaping a block of stone, removing flakes in a precise sequence, knowing exactly where the next strike needs to land to detach a perfect pre-shaped flake. This complex technique demonstrates advanced planning. It requires a mental template of the desired end product before striking the stone. It shows abstract thought, incredible foresight, and highly skilled craftsmanship. Such cognitive abilities are far beyond what would be needed for simple opportunistic tool-making. It's clear evidence of sophisticated cognitive control, indicating a complex understanding of material properties and flake mechanics.
And they didn't just use stone, did they? They clearly had a more diverse toolkit, probably relying on different materials for different tasks.
Absolutely not. They developed sophisticated wooden spears, as evidenced by findings at Schöning in Germany. These date back to around 350,000 years ago.
Wooden spears. That old.
Indeed. And these weren't crude, sharpened sticks. Studies reveal that Neanderthals systematically manufacture the point of these spears from the root of a 56-year-old spruce tree. The root is likely the hardest part of the tree, demonstrating a deep knowledge of material properties and deliberate selection for durability and effectiveness in hunting.
Choosing the right part of the wood.
Precisely. It suggests specialized woodworking skills for specific purposes. They also produced specialized bone tools like lassoirs, which are smooth, polished bone tools. Now, while the specific uses can be debated, archaeological findings, especially when compared to ethnographic accounts from modern traditional societies, suggest a pattern. Tools used for scraping hides for fleshing, removing meat and fat, and dehairing were most likely made of stone. However, tools for puncturing holes, which would be necessary for lacing hides to racks or maybe sewn clothing, were most likely made of bone. Things like pointed rib perforators or awls made from long bone splinters.
Ah, so stone for scraping, bone for piercing.
That seems to be the pattern. It indicates a very specific selection of raw materials based on the task at hand, showing a practical engineering mindset.
This leads us directly to the crucial topic of clothing. Neanderthals lived in glacial climates, facing intense cold. They must have needed more than just fire to survive those harsh conditions. What's the evidence for their clothing production?
Indeed. Surviving Ice Age Europe without effective clothing seems almost impossible, while direct archaeological evidence of Neanderthal clothing itself is incredibly rare. Organic materials like hides or fibers just don't preserve well over tens of thousands of years. A substantial body of indirect evidence strongly suggests its widespread use for thermal insulation. This would have been a critical survival strategy.
What kind of indirect evidence?
Well, for instance, a stone scraper dating back 200,000 years, discovered at the very same Neumark Nord site we discussed earlier. It contained a small amount of residue. This residue was likely from hide processing and, significantly, included acid from oak bark.
Oak bark.
Yes, a substance well known for its use in tanning or preserving animal skins. This is a very early example of chemical processing. Furthermore, pointed tools made of both bone and stone, specifically identified as awls, have been discovered at late Neanderthal sites in central France. These tools indicate that Neanderthals crafted implements specifically for piercing and attaching hides together, presumably for clothing or perhaps for constructing shelters.
But what about actual fabric? Did they weave, or were they limited to simple hides just wrapped around them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, the oldest direct evidence of Neanderthal fiber technology is truly compelling. It's a fragment of a 3-ply cord found stuck to a stone tool from southeastern France, dating to between 41,000 and 52,000 years ago.
A cord, like string.
Exactly, but more complex. To visualize this, imagine a piece of ancient flint, maybe no bigger than your thumbnail, with a small, intricate coil of twisted fibers attached to its surface. It looks like a miniature, finely braided rope. And this isn't just a single random strand, it's a precisely twisted 3-ply structure.
3-ply. That takes skill.
It demonstrates deliberate craftsmanship and an understanding of fiber properties, like tensile strength. How twisting fibers together makes them stronger. While cords and ropes have various uses for bags, nets, or hafting tools, this discovery strongly suggests the potential for much more complex applications, things like the production of fabric or even shoes. It fundamentally challenges the idea that such sophisticated fiber technology was exclusive to Homo sapiens. It shows a level of technical and conceptual ability that implies real cognitive complexity.
That's remarkable evidence of their technical capabilities. What other clues do we have about their hide work and how critical it was, maybe even integrated into their bodies?
Ah, yes, a fascinating line of evidence comes from their teeth specifically, dental wear patterns. The front teeth of nearly all Neanderthals exhibit significant wear, far more pronounced than the wear on their back teeth.
More wear on the front. Why?
This distinctive pattern is strikingly similar to that observed in contemporary Inuit people. The Inuit habitually use their mouths to hold and soften animal hides during clothing production, essentially, using their teeth as a third hand for processing materials.
Using their teeth as tools.
Exactly. That suggests a habitual, long-term practice integrated into Neanderthal daily lives. It demonstrates a profound biocultural adaptation that was fundamental to their survival in cold environments. Moreover, modeling studies, based on the climatic conditions they faced, predict that Neanderthals in colder regions would have needed to cover up to 80% of their bodies.
80% coverage.
Likely with non-tailored garments, perhaps, but significant coverage to effectively mitigate the risks of frostbite and hypothermia. Ancient tanning methods they may have employed, as suggested by ethnographic parallels, included drying, oiling, smoking, and softening hides with various substances, things like animal fats, urine, dung, or brains. Yes, it sounds strange, but one deer brain, remarkably, contains enough natural oil to tan its own hide. It's a process involving mashing the brain into a solution to soak and soften the hide. This highlights their deep practical knowledge of natural resources and, well, basic chemistry.
The picture emerging is far more sophisticated than simply draping themselves in raw hides. It speaks to a very structured approach to survival, implying a lot of time and effort.
Absolutely. The continuous need for clothing implies a consistent demand for animal hides. This would have significantly influenced their hunting strategies and resource exploitation patterns. They wouldn't just hunt for meat, they'd hunt for hides too, requiring a more holistic approach to their environment. The labor-intensive nature of hide processing, involving multiple steps like fleshing, scraping, curing, and softening, it suggests a substantial allocation of time and effort within their daily routines. And this labor investment strongly hints at a division of labor within communities. Well, different individuals or groups might have specialized in various stages of the process. This highlights the interconnectedness of their technological, subsistence, and social systems. It wasn't just one person doing everything.
Let's turn back to their mastery of fire. Beyond warmth and cooking, how else did they use it in these ancient industries? Perhaps even as a tool to engineer materials.
Neanderthals were not only proficient in controlling fire, but also regularly utilized shelters, showing a deep understanding of thermal management. We already touched on fire's crucial role in bone grease rendering, using heated stones to boil bone fragments for fat extraction. Beyond that, fire was essential for the production of birch tar.
Birch tar. That sounds complex.
It is. It's a complex adhesive. This isn't a simple campfire trick. It requires precise heating of birch bark resin to approximately 150 degrees C, that's 302 degrees F, in an oxygen-deprived environment.
Oxygen-deprived. How would they manage that?
Probably by burying the bark under hot embers, or using some kind of simple kiln structure. It required careful control. Experimental results clearly demonstrate that birch tar, especially when mixed with selected high alkaline wood ash, like holly ash perhaps, has potential as an effective lead or glue. This might have been required in the manufacture of tailored or complex clothing, or for hafting tools.
Wow, so advanced chemistry again.
It's a remarkably complex technology, similar in sophistication to those known from certain African Middle Stone Age sites much later. What's even more interesting is that Neanderthals systematically selected materials with specific properties for particular purposes. For example, they used the hard spruce fruit for their spears, as we discussed. And in Poggetti Vecchi in Italy, dating to around 171,000 years ago, Neanderthals were using fire as a tool to make working extremely hard boxwood much easier.
Using fire to soften wood.
Essentially, yes, pre-softening it to work it more effectively. This indicates a sophisticated understanding of how heat could alter material properties. They were practical engineers.
And you mentioned earlier that they might have been shaping entire landscapes with fire. That's an astonishing level of environmental impact for a prehistoric hominin. How do we know this wasn't just accidental burning?
Right. That brings us back to a crucial point. Beyond these direct utilitarian applications, there is compelling evidence suggesting that Neanderthals may have actively managed their landscapes through repeated burning. At Neumarkt Nord, that notable coincidence of open vegetation with a continuous 2,000-year hominin presence around 125,000 years ago, it strongly implies a distinct ecological footprint and a significant, likely intentional role in vegetation transformation.
So not just accidental campfire spreading.
The duration and correlation suggest something more deliberate. This directly challenges the long-held view of prehistoric hunter-gatherers as having only a limited passive impact on their ecosystems. Instead, it suggests a more active role in shaping their environment, possibly, as we said, to improve the predictability and yield of prey animals or plant food resources. This level of environmental manipulation points to a far more sophisticated understanding of their ecosystem than previously attributed, demonstrating foresight and long-term planning.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on their industries. Let's do a mega recap here. We've seen how Neanderthals were masters of ancient industries, showing remarkable ingenuity.
Absolutely. Far from primitive.
From the large-scale fat factory at Neumarkt Nord, processing remains from at least 172 large mammals for bone grease rendering.
A massive operation requiring planning and fire control.
To their sophisticated toolmaking, the Levallois technique for stone, deliberately crafted wooden spears from hard spruce roots.
Showing real material science knowledge.
Their labor-intensive hide processing, essential for survival, evidenced by dentalware like the Inuit, tools like lissoirs and awls.
And even that amazing 3-ply cord fragment, hinting at fabric or complex weaving.
Plus their advanced fire use, not just for warmth, but for making complex birch tar adhesive and maybe even landscape management through burning.
Shaping their world actively.
These capabilities point to a deeply integrated biocultural adaptation critical for their survival in challenging Ice Age environments.
Definitely. It paints a very different picture.
So, to quickly cement some of these key takeaways, let's run through a few flashcard terms that really redefine Neanderthal life. First, Neumarkt Nord Fat Factory. evidence of industrial-scale bone grease rendering, showing complex resource management.
Key site, key activity.
Then, bone grease rendering, a sophisticated process of extracting vital fat from bones by fracturing and boiling, crucial for nutrition.
A complex chemical and physical process.
Levalet reduction strategy, advanced stone tool-making technique demonstrating deliberate planning and abstract thought.
Not just banging rocks together.
Schoningen spears, ancient wooden hunting spears showcasing Neanderthal woodworking expertise and material knowledge.
Amazing preservation, amazing skill.
Lissoirs, specialized bone tools likely used for processing animal hides, vital for clothing and shelter.
Tools for specific tasks.
Birch tar, a complex adhesive produced using precise fire control, demonstrating advanced material science and engineering.
Prehistoric superglue.
Three-ply cord, the oldest direct evidence of Neanderthal fiber technology, hinting at their capacity for fabric and complex weaving.
Mind-blowing tiny fragment.
Dental wear patterns, evidence from Neanderthal teeth suggesting habitual use in hide processing, akin to modern Inuit, their bodies adapted to their crafts.
A biocultural marker.
And finally, landscape management, indications that Neanderthals actively shaped their environment through burning and other activities.
Not passive occupants, but active agents. 4. Social organization and cognitive capabilities. A deeper look.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
all this technological prowess, this industrial complexity, the foresight you described, it all seems impossible without sophisticated social structures and genuinely advanced cognitive abilities, right? What does the evidence tell us about how their minds worked and how they lived together?
Exactly. You can't really separate the technology from the society and the mind that created it. The evidence we're uncovering reveals a complex social fabric and intellectual capacities among Neanderthals that are, well, far beyond previous assumptions. They were not solitary, simple creatures, but beings with intricate social lives and advanced thought processes.
Let's start with their social organization then. What do we know about how Neanderthals lived together and, crucially, cared for each other, especially the vulnerable members of their group? This would be a profound indicator of their humanity, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. The care for vulnerable individuals reflects remarkably complex social bonds and a clear sense of altruism. It indicates a sophisticated moral framework and strong community cohesion. For example, Shanidar Z, a Neanderthal female unearthed at Shanidar Cave in Kurdistan, dating back around 75,000 years ago. She's believed to have been deliberately interred with 9 other Neanderthal individuals. This specific burial arrangement strongly indicates intentional care for the injured and the dead, as Shanidar Z herself showed signs of significant trauma that likely would have required long-term care from others to survive as long as she did.
So they were looking after their injured.
It certainly appears so. Furthermore, around 70,000 years ago, we see a shift where some Neanderthal groups began burying infants, or at least parts of them, in carefully prepared pits. Later at La Forassie in Dordogne, France, a site used between 60,000 and 75,000 years ago, there's clear and compelling evidence of what seems to be a cemetery.
A cemetery, like multiple planned burials.
Yes, with 7 individual burials. This includes the presence of what look like funerary markers, a series of 9 sediment mounds, one of which apparently overlaid a pit containing a child. An engraved bone was found with an adult skeleton in burial 1, and notably, a stone slab covering the burial pit of a 3-5-year-old child, individual 6, had its inferior face decorated with cup holes.
Cup holes, like little carved depressions.
Exactly. To visualize this, imagine a child's grave and a heavy stone covering it, with small, deliberately carved depressions on its underside facing the body. These details, like the deliberate excavation of distinct burial pits for individuals such as La Forassie 3 and 44A, they strongly suggest intentional mortuary practices. It goes beyond mere disposal of a body, implying a deep respect for their deceased and perhaps the grieving process. Kebara Caves in Israel also shows a possible deliberate Neanderthal burial dated to around 60,000 years ago, positioned centrally with interstratified hearths, indicating continued interaction with the burial site over time.
Wow, that's incredibly moving, actually.
It really is. These acts signify deep emotional connections and respect for their deceased, very similar to practices found among early Homo sapiens.
That's a powerful image of community and complex emotional life. Was there any specialization or division of labor within these groups, or did everyone do everything? It seems like some of the industrial processes you described, like hide processing, would benefit from specialization.
That's a good point. While specific, detailed evidence for a rigid division of labor is, well, limited and hard to interpret, Studies of cranial asymmetry have indeed suggested a possible sex-based division of habitual activities.
Cranial asymmetry, differences in skull shape.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Adult women tended to have a slightly larger right parietal, that's the skull bone on the side and top of the head, compared to adult men. This anatomical difference, likely resulting from repetitive actions over a lifetime, suggests that men and women probably engaged in different habitual activities. It implies some form of task specialization within the group.
But maybe not for everything.
Probably not. For instance, it's likely that both men and women participated equally in the hunting of large animals, which would have been a shared, crucial activity for the whole group. But this specialization, even if limited to certain tasks, points to an organized social structure that would have enhanced efficiency in resource acquisition and processing for the entire group. It's just a more productive community overall.
How did they manage those massive hunts you mentioned earlier? Like for elephants, that would require immense coordination and communication. How do we know it wasn't just a chaotic frenzy?
Cooperation was absolutely vital for their subsistence strategies, especially when it came to megafauna like straight-tusked elephants. Taking down a single elephant, for example, would have involved a significant number of Neanderthals working together, coordinating their efforts to bring down such a formidable animal. It wasn't a solo job. The subsequent butchery process alone, just considering the immense size of the animal, would have required 3 to 5 days of work.
3 to 5 days.
Yes, and the participation of approximately 25 individuals just for efficient processing before the meat spoiled or scavengers arrived. This level of coordinated effort highlights not only advanced communication but also intricate planning and resource sharing. It reinforces the idea of a structured social fabric capable of complex collective action. Studies like Moran and Laborde, as mentioned, further demonstrate this with evidence of coordinated group ambushes, where Neanderthals often used natural landscape features like gullies or ravines to trap prey animals.
Using the terrain to their advantage.
Precisely. They also demonstrated selectivity in processing carcasses, choosing the most valuable parts first. This indicates highly efficient planning, and it often relied on their deep knowledge of prey animals' social behavior to move them into prepared killing zones, sometimes without driving them to flight until the very last minute. This demonstrates truly sophisticated tactical thinking and a collective intelligence that rivals our own early ancestors.
What about their population dynamics? Were they widespread or more localized and fragmented? This must have influenced their social interactions and maybe their vulnerability.
That's a very important factor. Genetic studies reveal that Neanderthal populations were generally small and often geographically isolated across their vast Eurasian range. Estimates suggest a relatively low average of about 1,500 reproductive females across Europe between 70,000 and 38,000 years ago.
Only 1,500 females across all of Europe? That seems incredibly low.
It is low, with a maximum of perhaps 3,500 at any given time. These inherently small numbers made them extremely susceptible to demographic shifts, diseases, or environmental stresses. This also led to low genetic diversity within their groups. However, genetic data also indicate that female migration likely occurred between communities.
Females moved between groups.
Yes, suggesting a system of exogamy where females might have moved to join other groups, perhaps for mating or resource reasons. This would have helped maintain some level of genetic exchange despite overall small group sizes and geographical isolation. But these small, kinship-based social networks, coupled with the challenges of maintaining genetic diversity in small populations, it paints a picture of communities facing significant demographic pressures. Interestingly, new research from Amud and Kibara caves in northern Israel shows strikingly different butchering strategies between Neanderthal populations. This is despite them living in close proximity and using similar tools and resources.
Different traditions in nearby groups.
Exactly. It suggests the development of distinct local traditions passed down through social learning, implying cultural divergence even among closely related groups. It shows cultural transmission.
This brings us right to their minds. What do we now understand about Neanderthal cognitive abilities and symbolic behavior? For so long, we thought abstract thought and creativity were exclusive to Homo sapiens. Were they truly capable of such things?
The cognitive capabilities of Neanderthals have been a subject of intense debate for decades, but the mounting evidence increasingly suggests they were far more sophisticated than previously thought. Neanderthal brains were roughly the same size as, or even slightly larger than, those of modern humans.
Large?
On average, yes, slightly. Though they did differ in shape, with larger areas dedicated to vision, possibly related to lower light levels in Ice Age Europe, and potentially slightly smaller frontal lobes. Now, while some earlier interpretations suggested this might imply differences in problem solving or social behavior, the overall consensus among researchers today is that Neanderthals were highly intelligent. Their intellectual capacities were at least comparable to contemporary Homo sapiens. They possessed, as some researchers put it, interconnected worlds and comparable cognitive abilities, allowing them to navigate complex environments and develop sophisticated cultures.
That's a profound shift in understanding. But are there any lingering questions about the extent of their intelligence? Or, the big one, could they speak like us? With complex language? Or was their communication more rudimentary?
That's a vital question, and the answer seems increasingly clear. Crucially, recent research indicates that Neanderthals possessed the biological and anatomical capacity for complex speech.
The capacity for speech, how do we know?
Through studies reconstructing their auditory and vocal anatomy, examining everything from their hyoid bone, that's a small bone in the neck that anchors the tongue, crucial for speech articulation, to the tiny bones in their middle ear. These studies suggest they could perceive and produce the full range of frequencies found in modern human speech, including consonants.
Consonants are key, right?
Absolutely vital. Consonants carry a significant amount of information in human language, distinguishing human language from other primate communication patterns that are often dominated by simpler vowel sounds. This implies they had a communication system potentially as complex and efficient as modern human speech, which would have been absolutely essential for transmitting intricate cultural knowledge, like tool-making techniques, coordinating large-scale activities like those complex hunting strategies we discussed, and fostering the kind of strong social cohesion evident in their care for the vulnerable. Without complex language, many of the behaviors we've discussed would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to sustain across generations.
And what about symbolic expression, art, ornaments, things beyond pure utility? For so long, symbolic expression was seen as the hallmark of Homo sapiens' superiority. What's the most compelling evidence that dispels that long-held belief for Neanderthals?
The evidence for symbolic behavior among Neanderthals is increasingly robust and, frankly, compelling. It's getting harder and harder to deny. As early as 250,000 years ago, they were mixing minerals like hematite, that's red ochre, and manganese with fluids to create red and black paints.
Paints. 250,000 years ago.
Yes, presumably for body and clothing decoration. This isn't just a utilitarian application. It's about aesthetics, identity, personal expression. More direct evidence of symbolic expression comes from deep caves in Spain, where Neanderthals used red pigments to paint marks on walls at least 65,000 years ago.
Cave paintings made by Neanderthals.
That's what the dating indicates, yes. Specific examples include colored stalactites in Ardell's cave, distinct hand outlines or stencils in Maltreviso cave, and a distinctive rectangle created by repeatedly pressing pigment-covered fingertips to a wall in La Pasia cave. While the specific meaning of these marks remains unknown, whether they were narrative, ritualistic, boundary markers, or purely decorative, they strongly suggest an increasing imaginative capacity and a desire to leave lasting marks on their environment. This is something traditionally associated solely with early modern humans.
And personal adornment. Did they make and wear jewelry like amulets or pendants?
Yes, later, around 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals began using personal ornaments made from animal body parts. Things like pendants made from carnivore teeth, perforated shells, and engraved bone fragments. These are strikingly similar to ornaments worn by Homo sapiens during the same period in other regions.
So similar behaviors appearing around the same time.
It's exactly. A particularly intriguing discovery comes from Chiore Cave in Romania, dating to around 47,900 years ago. It includes a painted geode that's a rock with internal crystal formations, kind of beautiful in itself, and the oldest ochre preparation containers made of stalagmites.
Preparation containers for making paint.
Precisely. This indicates aesthetic and symbolic importance attached to unique natural items and the deliberate preparation of pigments for some non-utilitarian purpose. This directly counters arguments that such behaviors were exclusive to Homo sapiens. Recent data also suggests an interest in, and perhaps even a cultural tradition of, the collection and manipulation of bird feathers and talons. This is indicated by the overrepresentation of bird wing bones, especially from raptors in some Neanderthal sites.
Feathers and talons. Maybe for decoration.
It seems likely. This broad array of evidence for personal ornamentation, pigment use, and cave art paints a picture of beings with a rich inner world and a capacity for symbolic thought and expression, challenging those old assumptions. They weren't just surviving, they were expressing themselves.
So, just thinking back on this section, how has our understanding of Neanderthal community and thought evolved?
It's undergone a revolution, really,
We've explored their complex social bonds through powerful evidence like care for vulnerable individuals and deliberate burials of the dead.
showing deep emotion and social structure.
Their highly cooperative hunting of megafauna, which required advanced planning and communication.
Not just brute strength, but coordinated strategy.
And even suggestions of a division of labor within their groups, seen in things like cranial asymmetry.
Hinting at organized societies.
We've also delved into their sophisticated cognitive abilities, their biological capacity for complex speech comparable to modern humans,
A game changer in how we view them.
and a rich symbolic world expressed through the use of pigments, early cave art, and diverse personal adornments like pendants and feathers.
They had culture, they had art.
This paints a picture of beings far more like us socially, emotionally, and intellectually than previously believed. It truly reshapes their place in the human story. 5. Conclusion. This raises an important, perhaps poignant question. Given all this incredible ingenuity and complexity, we've discussed their advanced industries, sophisticated social structures, their symbolic lives, even complex speech. Why are Neanderthals no longer with us? What ultimately happened to them, and what is their enduring legacy?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? The extinction of Neanderthals was not a singular, sudden event, nor was it due to a single cause that we can easily point to. It wasn't that simple. Instead, it was a complex interplay of various interconnected pressures that accumulated over time, gradually pushing them towards the brink across their vast range.
What were the primary factors at play that made them so vulnerable, despite their impressive capabilities?
Well, firstly, their demographic vulnerability was significant. As we discussed, their populations were consistently small and often geographically isolated across Eurasia. Those estimates of only 1,500 reproductive females across Europe between 70,000 and 38,000 years ago. That's a tiny base.
Extremely small for such a large area.
Exactly. These inherently small numbers made them extremely susceptible to demographic fluctuations. Simple bad luck could have a huge impact. Studies have modeled this, suggesting that even a slight decrease of just 1.5% in infant survivorship.
Just 1.5%.
Yes, a tiny drop, perhaps due to new diseases,
Yeah.
increased resource scarcity, or environmental stress. That alone could have led to their population extinction within as little as 2,000 years in some models. Their low genetic diversity, despite some female migration between communities, also contributed to this vulnerability. It potentially limited their adaptive capacity to new environmental or biological challenges. It's like having all your eggs in a very small genetic basket.
Were there any major environmental shocks that might have played a role beyond gradual climate change, something that might have disproportionately impacted them?
Environmental factors certainly did contribute, alongside the demographic issues. Some researchers have suggested that the Lachamps geomagnetic excursion,
The magnetic field reversal?
yes, a brief but significant reversal of Earth's magnetic field that occurred around 41,000 years ago. It may have contributed to their extinction, at least regionally. This period likely brought about significant environmental instability. It could have increased cosmic radiation reaching the Earth's surface, potentially impacting health, and triggered shifts in climate patterns. This would have impacted resource availability and just made life even harder for already vulnerable populations. While not necessarily a direct, singular cause everywhere, it could have been a critical contributing stressor in specific regions. Maybe a final push in some areas?
And what about the interaction with Homo sapiens? Was it a wipeout, a direct conflict that led to their demise, as popular narratives sometimes suggest? Or was it something more nuanced?
The debate continues on the exact role of Homo sapiens. Did we contribute through direct conflict or warfare? Or, more indirectly, through competition for resources? Or perhaps by introducing new diseases to which Neanderthals had no immunity?
So conflict or competition?
While evidence of interpersonal violence does exist in Neanderthal, remains broken bones that healed, signs of trauma, a direct widespread link to Homo sapiens as the primary cause of their disappearance, is often unproven and, frankly, likely overly simplistic. Instead, the understanding now is that their already small, isolated populations were likely exacerbated by the arrival of a numerically larger and potentially more socially networked Homo sapiens population migrating into their territories.
So being outnumbered and outcompeted.
Possibly. Think of it less as a war and more as gradual outcompeting for the best hunting grounds, the best resources in a shifting environment. It was more a perfect storm of demographic, genetic, environmental, and interspecies competitive challenges. Not a simple case of inferiority on the part of Neanderthals facing a new competitor. Their disappearance was gradual and varied significantly by region. Populations in southern Iberia, for example, possibly persisted as late as 20,000 years ago, long after they had vanished elsewhere. This indicates a complex, drawn-out process, not a sudden, dramatic collapse across the board.
So, despite their extinction as a distinct species, Neanderthals didn't vanish entirely, did they? They left a lasting biological imprint, a genetic echo in us.
That's what's truly fascinating here, their enduring genetic legacy. Extensive genetic studies sequencing ancient DNA have revealed that interbreeding occurred between Neanderthals and the ancestors of non-African modern humans.
We interbred with them.
Yes. On average, approximately 1 to 4% of the genomes of non-African modern humans living today trace their ancestry directly back to Neanderthals.
1 to 4%. That's significant.
It is. This gene flow is estimated to have occurred at least 45,000 years ago, likely during an extended period of contact and breeding, perhaps at the gateway of Homo sapiens migration out of Africa, before the ancestors of present-day Europeans and Asians diverged. This means many of us listening, if we have non-African ancestry, carry a piece of Neanderthal history within our very DNA. It's a profound reminder of a much more complex and intertwined human story.
And these genes weren't just random relics floating around, were they? They actually offered some benefits to modern humans, helping us adapt to new environments outside Africa.
That seems to be the case, yes. The presence of Neanderthal genes in modern human DNA isn't merely an interesting historical footnote. It indicates that these genes were often beneficial, positively selected for, as Homo sapiens adapted to new environments outside Africa. For instance, some Neanderthal genetic variants have been linked to adaptations related to immunity, helping us fight off new pathogens encountered in Eurasia. Others relate to skin characteristics like pigmentation or hair type, which could have been beneficial in new climates with different UV levels or colder temperatures.
So we got a toolkit for new environments from them.
In a way, yes. It's a testament to a much more intertwined evolutionary history than previously understood, highlighting adaptation and survival through gene exchange. It wasn't just replacement, it was mixing. Interestingly, while Denisovans, a sister group to Neanderthals found mostly in Asia and Neanderthals, did interbreed at least once around 100,000 years ago. We have evidence of a first-generation hybrid individual, a daughter from a Neanderthal mother, and a Denisovan father found in Denisova Cave.
Wow, direct evidence of mixing between those groups too.
Yes, but recent studies found no evidence for Denisovan gene flow into the specific Neanderthals living much later at Chiriyurskaya and Oklodnikov caves in the Altai Mountains during the 20,000 years leading up to their local demise. This shows that interbreeding wasn't universal across all groups or time periods. It adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of ancient human interactions. It was patchy, contingent on who met whom when.
All right, let's wrap up this final section with a quick mega recap. We've concluded our deep dive by exploring the complex and multifaceted reasons for Neanderthal extinction.
No single, easy answer.
We've highlighted their inherent demographic vulnerability due to small, isolated populations and low genetic diversity.
Making them susceptible to shocks.
We also discussed the role of environmental pressures, like the Lachamps geomagnetic excursion, possibly adding stress.
Another factor in the mix.
And the nuanced impact of competition with the arrival of Homo sapiens, likely more about gradual pressure than outright conflict.
The perfect storm scenario.
Crucially, we've learned that despite their disappearance as a distinct species, they didn't vanish entirely. Their enduring genetic legacy lives on.
In many of us today.
Approximately 1 to 4% of non-African modern human genomes trace directly back to beneficial Neanderthal genes, particularly those related to immunity and skin adaptation.
Proving a much more intertwined and cooperative evolutionary history than previously thought.
And to solidify these final takeaways, here are some key terms to remember. Demographic vulnerability, the inherent susceptibility of small, isolated populations to extinction.
A key factor in their decline.
Lachamps geomagnetic excursion, a brief reversal of Earth's magnetic field around 41,000 years ago, a potential environmental stressor.
Adding to the pressure.
Interbreeding, the proven genetic exchange between Neanderthals and early modern humans.
We carry their genes.
Genetic legacy. The 1–4% of Neanderthal DNA present in non-African modern human genomes, indicating beneficial gene flow.
Their contribution to our adaptation.
And revisiting that idea from earlier, uncanny valley. A psychological concept perhaps relevant to early misperceptions of human-like but distinct beings like Neanderthals.
how our biases might have shaped the narrative.
This deep dive has truly taken us from the stereotypical brutish caveman to a remarkable understanding of Neanderthals as highly adaptable, intelligent, and culturally complex hominins. We've seen undeniable evidence of their industrial-scale fat processing, their sophisticated tool and clothing production, their advanced fire use, their complex social structures, and their rich, symbolic lives, including cave art and personal adornments. It completely flips the script on what it means to be a caveman.
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is how much our understanding has shifted, especially in recent decades. They weren't just survivors. They were innovators, engineers, artists. They were, in essence, familiar strangers, as some have called them. Their cognitive abilities and social complexity were, in many regards, comparable to our own ancient Homo sapiens ancestors living at the same time. The persistent quest to find what makes us unique often blinds us to the remarkable ingenuity and shared traits of these other human species. It blurs those lines in the most fascinating ways.
So what does this all mean for you, the curious mind navigating these historical shifts? This profound reevaluation of Neanderthal capabilities challenges us to rethink the very definition of humanity and that simplistic linear narrative of progress we often apply to human evolution. If our closest relatives were this sophisticated, capable of speech, art, complex industry, what might we still be missing about other early hominins, or even about the earliest chapters of our own prehistory?
It opens up so many questions.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to consider. If Neanderthals had such advanced capabilities, including sophisticated communication and symbolic expression, and their genetic legacy lives on in us, how much of what we consider uniquely human today is actually an inheritance, a shared trait derived from these remarkable long-gone cousins? And what might their story, a tale of ingenuity, adaptability, facing environmental challenges, and eventual demographic pressure, tell us about the future of our own species as we face our own environmental and demographic challenges today?